Finding grace in unexpected places. You've been given a Pharisaic model that says this is sacred and this is secular. And the first thing that I want to challenge is this: you will find grace in unlikely places. And one of the most unlikely places you're going to find grace is right where you
Hello and a warm welcome back to the teaching series Acts of Grace. I'm so glad that you're with me again, and so glad that we're actually getting into this book now. Thank you also for the comments that I've had so far back from people. Just the feedback on this book has been great. I'm really pleased you're enjoying it. I was thinking quite a lot about what should I do after the John series. And kind of Acts seemed to me to flow very naturally. As there's some things I really would like to talk about in this book, and I think there are things that we really need as a grace community to come to grips with, not least of which being, what does it mean for us to be a spiritual community? We've started in our studies and got as far as really seeing what happened at the day of Pentecost. And we saw that extraordinary sense that where there was this incredible outpouring of the Spirit. And for argument's sake, that was Sunday, and now we're left with this Monday morning feeling, if you like. It's a very extraordinary thought, because here we have in the UK, I don't know what happens in your country, but in the UK most pastors have Monday off. But on this particular Monday morning, something completely different was going to happen, because the 3,000 people that had been swept into the kingdom that day, these 3,000 tourists, if you like, these 3,000 holidaymakers, weren't going to go home. They were saying, well, this is our home now. And so the apostles were left scrambling, because Sunday brought the glory, but Monday brought the problems. What would the apostles do? I mean, here's 120 displaced fishermen, unemployed, if you like, and adrift. The master's gone, and now here they are in this city that, but 50 days ago, had crucified Jesus Christ. How would they survive? Let alone the 3,000. I mean, it'd be one thing to look after themselves, but now there's 3,000 additional people who've got no more traveller's checks, they've run out of cash, they've got businesses to return to, they've got families they're going to have to bring over to be with them. There's 3,120 people in Jerusalem with nowhere to meet. What are they going to do? Where are they going to find accommodation for these people? There's only 100,000 odd people that live in the city of Jerusalem. What in the world are they going to do? But they have this revival has broken out, and 3,000 people ain't going home. That's just as simple as that. They just say, this is where we are now. And it's really a very, very interesting story of how this kind of unravels. And the unraveling or the unwinding of this is really, I think, seeing the church in its glory. You know, when you read the stories of David's glorious days were his days in Adullam, his days out in the wilderness, not his days in palaces, not his days in the pomp, but really his days in that just unstructured way of living. And here you have it again. You have this glorious thought. Imagine that. 3,000 people swept into the community of grace, and they just say, well, we're not going. Gosh, I think Steve McVeigh, my dear friend and ministry friend, brother, etc., I think of some of the conferences that we've run, and I wonder, Steve, what we would do if, having run a radical conference in Atlanta or a radical conference in London or something, and the 3,000 people that turned up said, that's it. We're never going home again. We're going to throw our lot in. This is what we're going to do. What in the world would you do? Well, you know what? You've got some options, right? You could kind of send people home. You could try that. But I think the whole purpose of the feeding of the 5,000 was to say, that option ain't open to you. You saw in the Old Covenant, even under the law, when Jesus had finished the teaching that day, do you remember? And the people wanted something to eat, and the apostles or disciples, they said, well, just send them home, send them back to get something to eat from their homes. And Jesus said, no, it doesn't work like that. You feed them. So they know that the divine provision is capable of feeding them, but this is of another order. I mean, this is of another order. Where are they going to meet, for goodness sake? So they've got Solomon's porch, which will kind of turn out to be the meeting place. Can you imagine that? What an irony, by the way, that Solomon's porch becomes the meeting place, and so you have this very interesting little twist. that the outer court now becomes, if you like, the Holy of Holies. What an interesting reversal of things as of normal order, if you like. Can you imagine the extraordinary part of that you're filing past to go into the temple, and you on the inside, there you are on the inside praying for something, for the God to come from the outside, but those people on the outside have got Christ on the inside, and they are living in the glory festival of all time. Very, very nice. So you reverse this logic of the inner court, and I think that's kind of quite nice. But there's something really strong about that, because the idea for me about being outside of the temple is very powerful. I'll never forget, thinking of Steve and Melanie McVeigh again, I'll never forget the trip we made together to Rome after we finished a conference here in London. And we were looking around to try and find St. Paul's Basilica. Well, let me tell you something. Rome is famous for St. Peter's Basilica, as you will very well know. But St. Paul's Basilica, it was like nobody knew where it was. And we'd been travelling, and we had one day left. We were heading back to Rome. No, where were we going? Yeah, that's right. We were heading back to London, and we had one day left after we came back from Pompeii, and we decided, okay, let's go. We've got to find St. Paul's Basilica. We went to the Vatican, and they didn't know where it was. It was like unbelievable. We went to the information desk at the Vatican. Anyway, we eventually found St. Paul's Basilica, and the really interesting thing about it is his basilica is, wait for it, outside the city wall, outside the city gate. And my goodness gracious me, did that ever remind me of that verse in Hebrews where it says, we do have an altar, but our altar is outside of the city. And I'll tell you something, and you have to endure the reproach. It was such an incredible contrast. And we took the subway and we travelled out of town, and we went out through away from the beautiful Vatican City, and you kind of edge out a few stops down towards St. Paul's Basilica. And when you see it, my goodness gracious me, you walk through this flea market and you come out the back into this, it's quite nice, but come on, compared to the Vatican. And we went in there, and there may have been, 5 people in there. And we stood together, Hayley, Melanie, Steve and myself, around St. Paul's Basilica. You've got there in front of you the very manacles that they used to lock him in his chains when he was sat in the prisons. Sat there, looking at it, and there's the Basilica, and there's nobody there. There's like no one there. Yeah, way back in St. Peter's, they are queuing around the block to get into the cathedral, into the Vatican. And I'll tell you something, my goodness, what an amazing sense, and Steve and I both felt it immediately, an amazing sense we had from the Lord about that. But here it is, you see, this is it again, that this group of people are not inside, they're outside, and that's really quite interesting. And there they are, this new outer court ministry, if you like. And it's just a beautiful and a very simple idea, but there it was. But that's the reality. That's the reality for them. What are they going to do? Look, the other thing is this. Imagine you've got 3,000 people that come out of our convention, and they decide they're going to stay. They're never going to go home again. They're never going back. They're staying. And don't forget, these are people. Remember what it says in Acts 1. These are people from all over the world: Medes and Persians, Cretians. Remember that, it's really important, and they speak in different languages, and the thing that's united them is the saints speaking in the tongue. So there's a lot of stuff to figure out. There's a lot of stuff about these displaced people. There's a lot of stuff about it's a logistical nightmare. But here's another question: would you dare? Ask yourself this question: would you dare to tell 3,000 people to give it all up and to throw their lot in with Jesus? Would you do that? Or would you just send them home after the convention and tell them they'll see them next year and you'll be in touch by email? Imagine you were there on Pentecost Sunday. Imagine that on the Monday you were being asked to give it all up. Every dream, every plan, every ambition, every thought that you had to be the corporate man. And instead you're going to be the Philippians 3 man. It's going to forget everything that's behind you and just press in to know Jesus, all that you might know him. But don't forget, these people were not going to ask them to do anything they hadn't already done themselves. You see, these guys had given it all up. The 12 had done it. The 108 that were in the room with them had done it. Now these 3,000 were going to do it too. I mean, it just beggars belief. But in these early formative days, this looks like not the duty, but the delight of being a disciple. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, this was the church's finest hour. They decided, this is what they planned, they decided they'd go for it. They'd go for God. They'd go all the way, and they'd stay. Well, where are they going to live? That's the next problem. Where are they going to live? They'll live somewhere. And so, they come up with, I guess, a solution of sorts. There were people that did live in Jerusalem, so I guess what they did was they must have just bundled into everybody's house. I guess they would have kind of rented hotels, rented B&Bs as much as they could possibly get hold of. I guess what they would have done was had to sell all their stuff, clear everything out, just raise some money to buy some furniture or sell some furniture to make some room. I don't know what they did. Anyone who had mortgage-free properties, presumably they would sell them, use the cash, and they would kind of get more property or get more stuff. They'd have car boot sales or donkey boot sales, whatever you would have. They just do what they needed to do, and it was like it was something amazing was happening because something egoless was happening. There seemed to be no sense about this is mine and that's yours, but it was like the cross had washed that line between what's yours and what's mine away. And this wasn't just a fad, by the way. This didn't just happen over a weekend and then, like so many of the revivals we hear about in modern times, just kind of petered out. No, not at all. 160 years after Pentecost, there was a bitter pagan man by the name of Lucian, and he wrote this. He said about the Lord's people, he said, those imbeciles, that's you and me, those imbeciles who disdain all terrestrial things, and they hold them, and how did he say? And they hold all things to belong in common. And it was like, these people, I don't get it. They hold everything terrestrial, and that's important because we have got ourselves so lost, so confused, so caught up in our pursuit of stuff. We're so enamored by there are so many attachments. I must have this, I must get that, I must need more of those, and so on and so forth. But these people, he said, they just have this total disdain for anything terrestrial. In other words, these earthly attachments mean nothing to them. Instead, these imbeciles, as he called them, they just hold all things in common. I mean, that's a staggering thought, isn't it? And I think that the point that's worth holding on to about that, and Tertullian said 30 years after this is 190 AD, Tertullian said, we have all things in common except our wives. I think that's just beautiful. That's just beautiful. To be Christian, you see, meant to kind of give up everything. It's very different to what we see and sense and understand when we think about the Christian message today, isn't it? But this is how it was. Nothing was mine, everything was ours. And it's a beautiful way. It wasn't about what was in it for me, it was about what was in me for you. So when we come to this text and we kind of just get a sense of what this must have been like, just listen, would you, with me, please, as I read this to you, with the ears of someone who now understands that you've got 3,120 odd people who have committed themselves to having all things in common, who lay claim to nothing. The only thing they don't share is their wives, is what Tertullian told you. They have no interest in terrestrial things. They are, if you will, they feel like the kind of living embodiment of Matthew 6. I mean, I can't imagine anything more exciting than this. Could you imagine living in a community where literally the whole spirit of the place was a place where everybody, from the first to the last, wasn't worried about anything. Didn't let me remind you of how it's said. Let me remind you that these people were not anxious about their life. And they weren't anxious about what they would eat or what they would drink. They weren't anxious about the body. They weren't anxious about what they put on. But they knew that life was more than food and the body was more than clothing. Imagine living in a community where people just were able to truly look at their birds of the air, knowing they neither sowed nor they reaped, but they didn't gather in their barns. And yet they were confident that their Father in heaven would feed them. And knowing that they were more valuable than those. Imagine living in a community where everybody was of one mind and no one was anxious. No one was worried. No one was worried about anything. They just lived for the glory. They just lived as those that would host His presence and exude His presence. It's just the most wonderful thing. Not anxious about today, not concerned about yesterday, and not worried about tomorrow, but rather seeking only the kingdom of heaven. But before I get too watery-eyed and romantic about it, let me just take you back to the text I want to look at and set you up for our next study. So here they are, look, let me read it to you. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayers. And awe came upon every soul. And many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing things to all as they had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, and praising God and having favour with all the people. And the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. What a lovely image. What a wonderful after recapturing the days of Acts. What I am interested in is what those days look like today. What does that mean for us as a Grace community? And we're going to come back next time and think some more about just the components of this, because there's some interesting things that are pulled out of here. And we'll pick that up next time. But in the meantime, I wish you all well. May God bless you and may you continue to grow in grace. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.